Welcome to First Parish in Needham, Unitarian Universalist. I am Deborah Niles, member of the Social Action Committee and the Green Congregation Committee. First Parish is a Unitarian Universalist congregation founded in 1711 along with the town of Needham. We are proud to be certified as a welcoming congregation for our inclusivity of people of all sexual orientations and gender identities and expressions, as a green sanctuary for our commitment to addressing the climate crisis, and as a Level 2 sanctuary supporting congregation for our work in immigration reform and anti-deportation efforts. Whether you are a first-time visitor or a lifelong member, you can learn more about all that's happening at First Parish by going to our website, uuneedham.org, or following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. As you know, what's happening right now at the congregation is very different than usual because of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. Our building is closed and we are gathering online only, as is recommended by health officials and local government. We will plan to follow the lead of school closures to make decisions about when we will gather again in person. We expect to stay closed at least through to the end of June. We encourage everyone to engage with one another through video and phone calls during this time, and keep connected even as we keep our distance. Our Sunday services are pre-recorded by our wonderful staff and worship volunteers and streamed on Sunday morning so that we can all enjoy the familiar routine of spending Sundays together. Our First Parish community has become creative about how we can stay in touch and renew our spirits without meeting in person. And we hope you have been plugging into our Zoom gathering opportunities throughout the week. For example, you are invited to our Zoom social hour directly following this worship service. Please find the link in your Saturday Bell Notes email. If you're joining us for the first time this Sunday, or you don't know what we're talking about when we refer to the Saturday Bell Notes or the emailed order of service, you can sign up to be included in those emails next week by going to our website, uuneedham.org, and clicking Get Involved Newsletter, or sending your request by email to office@uuneedham.org. We know this way of worshiping and gathering together is an adjustment for all of us. However, our sincere hope and prayer is that these online services and connection opportunities will help us keep the physical distance required during this coronavirus pandemic without losing much of the spiritual, emotional, and social closeness we treasure in our faith community. Welcome again to all, and good morning. This morning we light our chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, with words from retired UU minister, Reverend Dr. Claudine Oliva. We light this chalice for mothers and mothering, to celebrate those who have taken on the task of nurturing a young one, baby, child, or youth, into adulthood. To celebrate those who have nourished the light of truth and compassion in growing minds and hearts. To celebrate those who have committed time, money, and/or energy to the growth of others in this world. We light this chalice to celebrate and hold dear this flame of love.
Good morning. Let's join together in our call to worship this morning. It is written by Becky Brooks, and it is called Even in the Most Broken Places, There is Room for Love. She writes, Mother's Day is complicated. Joyful for many, yes, but complicated. It's right there on the calendar, even if your mother has died. Even if you've been told yet again that you're still not pregnant. Or if you've never been more scared that you are right now because you are pregnant. It's Mother's Day. Even if your own mother's priorities included everything but you, there's going to be a Mother's Day Google Doodle with flowers and pink stuff. Even if you have scars, ones you can see or ones you can't, it's Mother's Day. That cake mix commercial is going to roll out 4 times an hour, even when you can't stop shaking and crying because you can't believe you slapped your little boy today. It's Mother's Day, and we all have to live with that in those silent, breathless moments, because even when the baby dies, it's Mother's Day. And so, let's go to church. Let's be a church where we can acknowledge how difficult it is to have this day right alongside how joyful this day can be. Let's be a church where we don't pretend there aren't inky depths of space between us, even when we sing. Let's be a church that fills the space between our differences with love, because even in the most broken places, there is room for love, and we can be that church. Blessed be. Let's join together now in our opening hymn, number 347, Gather the Spirit. It's written by Jim Scott, who is a Unitarian Universalist songwriter who lives in Oregon. The words will appear on your screen.
In Unitarian Universalist tradition, the covenant is a set of promises the membership of the church strives to honor with one another and out in the world. Please say along with me from home the words of our parish covenant as printed in your emailed order of service. We gather as a loving community to encourage and comfort one another. We gather as a diverse community to support each other in our search for spiritual truth. We gather as a service community to live our beliefs through action and care for our world. Though we cannot gather in person during this time, we are living these promises every day.
Hey, First Parish friends. Happy Mother's Day. Who would have thought I would be doing a selfie as my time for all ages? But here we are. I miss you all, and I do hope you are having a happy Mother's Day. One of my favorite Mother's Day gifts I got was this mug. Here, let's see if you can see it. It says, "I never knew how much love my heart could hold until someone called me mommy." There's my girls about 6 years ago, and even our fur baby. But did you know that the Mother's Day we celebrate with gifts and flowers and hugs and breakfasts is actually not the first Mother's Day? Yes, 40 years before the Mother's Day we celebrate started, a different Mother's Day was started by the Unitarian abolitionist and suffragette Julia Ward Howe. In 1870, she wrote the Mother's Day Proclamation, a call to action that asked mothers to unite in promoting world peace. In 1873, Howe campaigned for a Mother's Peace Day to be celebrated every June 2nd. Around the same time, Anne Reeves Jarvis of West Virginia helped start Mother's Day work clubs to teach local women how to properly care for their children. These clubs later became a unifying force in a region of the country still divided over the Civil War. In 1868, Jarvis organized Mother's Friendship Day, at which mothers gathered with former Union and Confederate soldiers to promote reconciliation. After the death of her mother, in 1905, Anna Jarvis worked tirelessly lobbying to make Mother's Day a national holiday. Mothers need to be celebrated. President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed May 9, 1914, the first Mother's Day. He asked Americans on that day to give a public thank you to their mothers and all mothers. Anna Jarvis had originally conceived of Mother's Day as a day of personal celebration between mothers and families. While Jarvis had initially worked with a Philadelphia department store owner named John Wanamaker in May of 1908 and the floral industry to help raise the Mother's Day profile, by 1920 she had become disgusted with how the holiday had been commercialized. She outwardly denounced the transformation and urged people to stop buying Mother's Day flowers, cards, and candies. Jarvis eventually resorted to an open campaign against Mother's Day profiteers. Despite the commercialization that Anna Jarvis was so disappointed in, at times, Mother's Day has also been a date for launching political or feminist causes. In 1968, Coretta Scott King, wife of Martin Luther King Jr., used Mother's Day to host a march in support of underprivileged women and children. In the 1970s, women's groups also used the holiday as a time to highlight the need for equal rights and access to childcare. And right here in the Boston area, since 1996, people have been doing the Mother's Day Walk for Peace to benefit the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, a center of healing, teaching, and learning for families and communities impacted by violence, grief, trauma, and loss. So, what do you think about that Mother's Day? It does definitely have a different spirit. You know me, I love talking about my girls, but I also love highlighting the compassion and how compassion can be like magic spreading through our lives, especially in times like this. So I invite all of us to take a moment to think about, in the spirit of motherly love, what is one thing I'm going to do today? What is one thing I'm going to do this week to spread compassion?
We've come to the time in our service when we share joys and concerns that are very close to our hearts and lives. In this new format, joys and sorrows are emailed to me by Thursday night, and I will share them aloud and light candles for you all. As we are making the link to our virtual Sunday services public and open to all visitors, be aware that we cannot guarantee that news shared in Joys and Concerns will stay within the First Parish community. So if you wish to share in a more private setting, I encourage you to reach out to me or to our Pastoral Care Associate of the Week, whose name is included in your emailed order of service. Let us now hear the joys and sorrows of our community.
A candle from Linda D. for her husband Jack, who has been in the hospital for 2.5 weeks now and is being very brave. He's slowly gaining strength and hopes to move into a rehab facility soon. A candle of appreciation from the Reverends Clyde and Michelle to honor the care and hard work of the pastoral care team, including their gesture of holding a safe and socially distant vigil outside the Davis household when Jack was first in the hospital. A candle of sorrow from Vicky M. for her mother Elisa, who died quite unexpectedly this Wednesday, May 6th. A candle of sorrow from Reverend Michelle for Tina Cherry's mother, who passed away from COVID-19 on Friday, May 8th, at age 79. Tina was our guest preacher here on April 19th and spoke powerfully about grief, loss, and finding peace. Tina asks for prayers for her family, especially as they face their first Mother's Day walk for peace without their mother. A candle of joy from Rebecca K.S. for her great-nephew Killian, who was born on Wednesday, May 6th, healthy and strong at 8 pounds and 1 ounce. Rebecca can't wait to meet him. A candle of joy from Gail L. for her wonderful brother Douglas on his 70th birthday. This is their first Mother's Day without their mother, and Douglas is now the elder of the family. We wish Douglas a very happy birthday. A candle of joy from Jessie B., who is happy to be called Grandma. Her daughter Kate and Kate's husband Nurus were thrilled to welcome a healthy baby boy into the world on Wednesday, May 6th. All are doing well, and Jessie hopes to meet baby Idris in person very soon. Idris is the first grandchild born on both sides of his family.
And I light one final candle for all the joys and sorrows that are still carried quietly in our hearts. During this time of physical separation, let us not forget that we are still deeply interconnected and bound together through mutual love, support, and commitment to each other.
This congregation has been supported by the volunteered time and treasure of its members and friends since its founding in 1711. In those 300 years, this community has seen some tough times, but we're still here. This is the time in our service when we, the modern stewards of this church, offer to give what we can to build and sustain the world we envision. For most of May, our plate collection is being divided equally between First Parish in Needham and the Needham Diversity Initiative, which is a local nonprofit committed to celebrating, exploring, and strengthening Needham's diversity. To donate to today's offering, you can use one of 3 different methods. For those of you with a smartphone, you can use our new Text to Give program. Just put in the phone number 73256 and text to that number UU Needham space plate space then the $ with the amount you'd like to give, all in one message. If you want your money applied to your pledge for the current fiscal year, please text instead that same phone number 73256 with UU Needham pledge 20, the $, and the amount you'd like to give. And if you missed those instructions, you should be able to find them in yesterday's emailed order of service. If you prefer to mail a check to First Parish, please make it out to First Parish in Needham, put the date May 10th, 2020, and the word collection in the memo line, and then mail your check to 23 Dedham Avenue, Needham, Mass. 02492. Alternatively, if you want the money applied to your pledge for this fiscal year, put FY20 in that memo line instead. The last and perhaps easiest method is to use our website, uuneedham.org, to make your donation. There is a giving button in the upper right corner with a drop-down menu where you'll find an entry labeled Donate Now. Following that link and signing in to your Realm account, you'll be able to fill in your donation amount, information, and choose a recipient fund for its destination, such as plate collection. Thank you for everything you're able to give to help support and sustain this congregation and the vital work of our community partners. Please take these next few moments to give what you can and know it will be gratefully received. Thank you.
While Mother's Day often is a complicated day for some and an extremely joyful day for others, it's helpful to remember that Mother's Day began with a proclamation by Julia Ward Howe, a proclamation by mothers against war, against violence. And there can be no more appropriate day on which to also honor the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute's Walk for Peace than this day, Mother's Day. And in fact, I recall Tina Cherry telling me that she had read the Mother's Day proclamation in one of the early walks for peace. So let's remember that on this day, and also in our hearts as we honor mothers who have lost their young people to war, to violence, to so many things. And we honor the fathers as well, and all nurturers who have lost people in these times. This is the original, or from the original Mother's Day Proclamation by Julia Ward Howe, written in approximately 1870. She wrote, "In this day of progress, in this century of light, the ambition of rulers has been allowed to barter the dear interests of domestic life for the bloody exchanges of the battlefield. Thus men have done. Thus men will do. But women need no longer be made a party to proceedings which fill the globe with grief and horror. Arise then, Christian women of this day. Arise, all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be that of water or of tears. Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We, women of one country, will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm. The sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence vindicate possession. As men have forsaken the plow and the anvil at the summons of war, let women now leave all that may be left of home for a great and earnest day of council. Here ends the reading by Julia Ward Howe. As we meditate now on the words of Julia Ward Howe, I invite you into a time and space of quiet meditation and prayer. I will lead a meditation first and then follow it with spontaneous prayer, and then we'll enter into a hymn. So you may want to find a comfortable way to be in your home, whether that's sitting or lying down, however your body desires to be right now. If it feels comfortable for you to close your eyes, then let your eyes close. If it feels more comfortable just to let your eyes drop into a soft focus, that's fine as well. However your body wants to be is totally fine. And just take a breath. And feel the breath moving through your body. It comes in cool, and it's warmed on exhale. It's important in our days just to take time to notice and appreciate that we are breathing. The breath is spirit, the breath is life. And notice if there are any parts of your body that are feeling tense this morning. And just see if you can apply a warm, healing presence to those parts and invite them to relax. It's okay if they can't relax, but just invite them to relax. You may want to shrug your shoulders up and let them down. You may want to give your body just a little shake. Roll your neck. We hold a lot of tension in our necks. If it helps to visualize some place where you feel particularly grounded, connected, peaceful, a beautiful place that you have visited, then you can imagine that, and imagining your body relaxing. Let the muscles of your face soften and relax. Your forehead soften and relax. And if you can, if you desire, just let a half smile come to your lips as I invite our bell to sound 3 times. And then we will be quiet together. And then I will invite it to sound again. God, goddess of many names and no names, many genders and no genders, in whom we know most closely and intimately in our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition as a precious and mysterious spirit of life and love that moves in us and among us and out into our larger world, breathing love upon the world, breathing justice upon the world. We are grateful this morning for our ability still to come together on Sundays in this new way, for the knowledge that the church goes beyond the walls, the brick and mortar of the church, and the church is the people. The church is the people who love and care for one another. We are grateful for all in this time who are working so hard to hold the virtual space of church for us. For those who labor behind the scenes to create this service every Sunday morning, from all the technical details to the worship plan and the music. We are grateful for everyone who works so hard on this. And we are grateful for the staff in particular, all the labor they are putting in this time. And we also extend gratitude this morning to the Pastoral Care Committee for their hard work, staying in touch, caring for us, caring for those among us who may feel isolated, who are sick, who have lost loved ones in the midst of this, who are struggling to be present with loved ones when they are separated. We are so grateful for the labor of love that we witness in this church. We hold in our hearts those among us as well as those in Needham, in Massachusetts, in our country, and our broader world, who are being impacted by this pandemic, who also may be suffering already from so many injustices that make life so much harder as it is. We continue to vow to do our best for them, including knitting masks as they are needed, bringing supplies, sending our donations out with love to this world, and holding also in our hearts all among us who are first responders, those we know and those we don't know. We hold in our hearts the anxiety of this time, the many questions that we have. When will it go back to normal? And we hold for consideration that this is a new normal coming out, and that we will continue to get through this time together with each other. May it always be so. Blessed be. Amen. Let's join together in our centering hymn. It's a contemporary hymn, so it comes from our teal hymnal normally. Number 1010, We Give Thanks. Number 1010, We Give Thanks. The words will appear on your screen.
Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
This morning, I want you to meet Julia Ward Howe. Now, she wrote the Mother's Day proclamation that Michelle read earlier in the service. And in the service of that Mother's Day proclamation, Julia traveled from city to city, giving speeches, wrote hundreds of letters, dedicated herself to the cause of a massive pledge drive, urging women to become war resisters. Yes, Julia Ward Howe was a peace activist and dedicated activist for women's rights. Yet the single act of which she is best known is writing the words of a song, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, one of the most bellicose of war songs. Let me read you the words. You'll hear the music in a minute. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. The words she wrote to the tune, the well-known tune at that time, although it was only 2 years old, John Brown's Body, John Brown's Body, lies smoldering in his grave with that tune. It was a kind of a folk ditty that came out just out of the massacre at Harper's Ferry that John Brown led. John Brown's Body. So the words in the Battle Hymn of the Republic are the words one would expect of Julia Ward Howe in 1861. She was a Unitarian, a writer, an abolitionist, and justice is what she lived for. And so the idea that God was going to trample out the evil of slavery just came right out of her mind, and she wrote it down, and it just became a hymn which you probably have heard 100 times. For 20 years, she had worked against slavery, and like many others at the beginning of the Civil War, her passions were aroused. Her congregation sent many young men off to war. They raised money, they helped organize parades. She saw her country enter into a fateful struggle, and she proclaimed a righteous God of history who was trampling out injustice with a terrible, terrible, swift sword. Yes, the words of the battle hymn were written at the beginning of the Civil War, a war that would soon repel her. As she experienced the destruction of that war, she did the unexpected, completely unexpected. She called on women to organize against the slaughter of war, to organize across national boundaries, women to rally and demonstrate and to say no to war. A very different Julia Ward Howe than in 1861. Julia Ward Howe was a woman of high society, lady of Dr. Howe's house, wife of a prominent physician and reformer. At the same time, she was an activist for women's rights, a peace activist who publicly declared herself to be a radical. Contradictions. I think not. Rather, if one considers her contemporaries, Julia Ward Howe's life was a model of mid-19th century Unitarianism. She sought to realize her gifts, and she worked to encourage others to realize theirs. Her spiritual journey was in many ways the journey of her generation. Julia grew up in New York City, and her father was a strict Calvinist in the Dutch Reformed tradition, and she was brought up in that tradition. In 1841, at the age of 21, she visited friends in Boston where she met, later married Dr. Samuel Howe, a wealthy Boston reformer and activist. Dr. Howe was a member of William Ellery Channing's Federal Street Church. Arlington Street Church is how that congregation fancies itself today. And like many members of that church, Samuel Howe had found a personal ministry in his life. He was inspired by Channing's message that we are all called to live the religion in the world. And that's what Samuel did. Samuel Howe lived the religion in the world. He found a personal ministry in making a special contribution to teaching the blind and the deaf. He was a man of many awards. You can look him up in the encyclopedia, Wikipedia these days, and you'll see he's an iconic social reformer. Perkins School for the Blind, Dr. Samuel Howe. The young Julia found in Channing's preaching liberation. Here she goes to the church of her husband. She hears this preacher preaching about having a special mission, living religion into the world, and it freed her from the restrictions of her father's house. The message of Channing inspired her. Her Calvinist religion had not inspired her, given her rules to obey. But now, as a Unitarian, she found the idea of a divine spark in every soul, and the idea that we must develop this into the world, a reason for striving and seeking. And she developed a close association with Channing, who encouraged her in her probing, urged her to develop her spiritual gifts, was kind of a spiritual mentor for her, and pursue her ideas. But during those 2 decades when her children were growing, she was also very circumscribed by the prejudice against women in public life. So she has, 1, she's being inspired, and 2, everyone is telling her, don't do that. The social norm that was assigned to her as a lady, as the wife of a gentleman, her husband was the activist, the public person. It was his role to make all those social changes, and her role to enable his efforts and to raise his children. The reality is that Samuel Howe did not question this norm. It was the way it was done. It was the way it was practiced by all the other families that they associated with. Yes, Channing's preaching inspired him, but he did not extend those ideas to Julia. He knew what society expected of his wife. So while Julia wished to become active in the community and make a contribution to the cause of social reform, she had 6 children. She had a house to manage. She had a husband who wanted her, as his lady, to support him in his public role. Another example of Dr. Howe's patriarchy, after 10 years of marriage, Julia inherited a small annuity, and he resented this independent income, and he would nag her all the time. Every now and then he'd nag her about her private wealth, what you're doing with your private wealth. So this was the life of Julia Ward Howe. In her 20s and 30s, her private journals reveal a woman inspired by this new religion of human potential. And she was supportive of reform efforts, but circumscribed, not in public. So the public role was left to Samuel, and she quietly developed her ministry, her contribution, by actively mentoring other women to realize the divine spark in them, within them, and the potential for their full human ministry in the world. And that mentoring and support of these women took place over tea and walks and socializing and discussion groups. And Samuel never noticed. She wrote poems and essays and published them anonymously so as not to be an embarrassment to her position. Now, at first, she did share her poetry with Samuel, but his reaction made her stop sharing her poetry. He took offense. He believed the poems implied a criticism of himself, of their relationship to genteel Boston society. So she stopped sharing her poems and her essays with her husband, and she published, but under a pseudonym. It was during these years, immediately before the Civil War, that Julia Ward Howe came into her own as a public person, organizing women in large-scale fundraising efforts to supply the anti-slavery movement in Kansas. She organized volunteers to visit the soldiers' hospital during the war. It was this experience of meeting the horrors of war and the broken bodies of young men and the long years of fighting and the devastating losses that started to make her anti-war. 1/4 of all the men in her congregation didn't come back. Many more came back with wounds or depression. It was this experience of what the actual war in the United States called the Civil War was that moved her to become a convinced opponent of war. This emergence into public life, finding her own special way of expressing her values, changed Julia Ward Howe. Speaking of the women's movement, she wrote in her reminiscence, "One of the comforts I found in the new association was the relief it afforded me from a sense of eccentricity, of isolation. She had been so lonely and isolated for so many years. Now, Mrs. Howe was speaking out, writing in her own name, witnessing that sacred potential she found in her life in so many public ways." A friend later recalled, from the moment Julia came forward in the women's peace movement, there was a visible change. It gave a new brightness to her face, a new cordiality to her manner. It made her calmer and firmer. She found herself among new friends, and she could disregard old critics. Of all her public achievements, all of them are in the last half of her long and productive life. She wrote later that she was an active 70-year-old and that during most of her life she had looked to the masculine ideal as the ideal of character. But then, as it become through her activity, she had come to understand the free development of women's character is like the addition of a new continent to the map of the world. In a letter circulated in early 1865, before Appomattox, when the troops were still in the field, Mrs. Howe proposed that a Mother's Day for peace, and on that day, mothers would dedicate themselves to the education of themselves and others for peace. The idea of a day for mothers to have a public forums, parades, sign pledges, vowing to resist sending their sons and husbands to war. Her idea was picked up by others, and over almost 15 years, almost 2 decades, the Mother's Day peace idea was a significant movement. People talked about it. There were meetings in different cities, not only meetings that Julia Ward Howe spoke at, but others spoke at. It was an ongoing movement. And in response to this movement, the mass media began pushing the idea of a Mother's Day to honor motherhood. It was this theme of the glory of the traditional family rather than Julia Ward Howe's idea of a mass action for peace that eventually became what we now know as Mother's Day. Howe continued her work for peace, women's suffrage, and an advancing opportunity for women her whole life. What became small gatherings in her home in the 1840s were now organized efforts to found women's colleges and advance women into graduate school programs, medical school programs, law programs. The Biographical Dictionary tells us that Julia Ward Howe was born in 1819 and died in 1916, that she was a homemaker, a poet, She was the founder and president of the Women's Suffrage Clubs, as well as the founder and editor of the Women's Journal. This is a bare list of achievements, and there were more. But even if we could list all of those achievements, it wouldn't capture the significance of what happened to Julia Ward Howe personally. How can one express what was a revolution in her life, a revolution of possibilities, a revolution that became the example to many others? Julia Ward Howe transcended in her lifetime the limited role assigned to her in the early 19th century. And during those years when her children were growing, when she listened to her beloved Unitarian preachers telling her that each person had gifts, had potential, she slowly determined to do something about it. And when she was good and ready, she did. She did. Happy Mother's Day. Let us join in singing Let It Be a Dance. It's a good song to get up and move to. Let It Be a Dance. Rick Marston wrote this song. Rick Marston was a Unitarian from the Midwest who went around to congregation leading services of music and inspiration. So Let It Be a Dance was written for us. Let it be a dance.
Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Let a dancing song be heard. Play the music, say the words, and fill the sky with sailing birds. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Learn to follow, learn to lead. Feel the rhythm, feel the need. To reap the harvest, plant the seed. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Everybody turn and spin. Let your bodies learn to bend. And like a willow with the wind, let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. A child is born, the old must die. A time for joy, a time to cry. Take it as it passes by. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Morning star comes out at night. Without the dark there is no light. If nothing's wrong, then nothing's right. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let the sun shine, let it rain. Share the laughter, bear the pain. And round we go again. Let it be a dance.
Rebecca Parker urges us, choose to bless the world. The choice to bless the world can take you into solitude and search for the sources of power and grace, native wisdom, healing, liberation. And it also can bring you into community with others. An endeavor shared, the heritage passed on, the companionship of struggle, the importance of keeping faith, the life of ritual and praise, the comfort of human friendship, the company of earth, and the chorus of life welcoming you. So choose to bless the world. Be at peace, be at love.
As we close our worship today, please remember to keep a careful eye out for emails from First Parish and follow us on social media so you can keep up with opportunities for connection with your faith community during these times of physical isolation. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to read your whole bell notes each week for links and opportunities to connect. When today's service ends, you are all invited to join us for our Zoom social hour, and you can find the link for that in your Saturday bell notes. Please remember, if you fall ill or need any pastoral support, to reach out to our pastoral care team and caring crew via phone or email. We also encourage all of you to strongly check in with your friends at First Parish and to double-check your own contact information in our online Realm directory if you have not done so recently. At this time, when we can only convene by phone call, email, and video chat, we want to be particularly sure that we know how to reach out to each other. I miss you all more every week. We always extinguish our chalice with words promising to carry its flame in our hearts until we are together again. And I know that I and you and all of us are deeply committed to that promise, no matter how long it is until we are together again. As we extinguish our chalice today, please join me from home in saying these words as printed in your emailed order of service, written by Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Elizabeth Selle Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, nor the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
While sailing on the ocean, while sailing on the sea, I bumped into the Savior, and he said, pardon me. I said, Jesus, you look tired. He said, Jesus, so do you. Sit down, son, 'cause I got some fat to chew. Well, everybody needs somebody that they can talk to, someone to open up their ears and let that trouble through. Now you don't have to sympathize or care what they may do, but everybody needs somebody that they can talk to. Well, he spoke to me of morality, starvation, pain, and sin. Matter of fact, the whole dang time I only got a few words in, but I won't squawk, let them talk. Hell, it's been a long, long time, and any friend that's been turned down is bound to be a friend of mine. Well, everybody needs somebody that they can talk to, someone to open up their ears and let that trouble through. Now you don't have to sympathize or care what they may do, but everybody needs somebody that they can talk to. Now we sat there for an hour or two just eating that gospel pie, when around the bend come a terrible wind and lightning hit the sky. He said, so long, son, I gotta run. appreciate you listening to me. And I believe I heard him sing these words as he skipped out across the sea. Well, everybody needs somebody that they can talk